Jake, you can take it away. Take it away, Jake.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. It is remarkable that this is how we hold press conferences now, isn't it? So it's also a testament, I think, to the agility of our day-to-day work lives that this is even possible. A point that was made over and over again in the research that many of you have probably taken a look at, and then I'm going to cover today. Let me give you the sort of the brief context of this. The Connected Commerce Council is a nonpartisan, nonprofit membership organization for digitally empowered small businesses, which now is pretty redundant. Almost every small business in the country is digitally powered to some degree, and those that are more so are more likely to still be business after 6 incredibly tumultuous months for American small businesses. The research that you have in front of you, the digitally driven results, are the byproduct of about 4 months of research and work, where we worked with 7,000 small businesses throughout the country, including 100 or more in every state. We tried to sample each state to the point of at least relevance, if not statistical significance. We also indexed in a manner that was consistent with employment trajectory for industries and types of companies throughout the country. This is about as good a snapshot as we're going to see on the state of American small businesses 6 months into the pandemic. With that said, what we found isn't surprising in many cases, but is incredibly informative. What we found is that there is such thing as a digital safety net. The idea that digital tools and services, resources, online marketplaces, and the technologies that we've come to rely on, when incorporated into the fundamental business operations of a small business, tend to make them more likely to survive crisis. That the agility and resilience that comes with these technologies created a better outcome, a significantly better outcome for small businesses. And one of the ways that we consider that is breaking down the 7,000 small businesses we talked to into digital drivers, digital adopters, and digital maintainers. Those categorizations applied to the number of tools being used and the sort of comfort level with those tools in the business operations of small businesses. You can see that we've broken that down nationally in terms of revenue lost year on year among those 3 categories, as well as state by state. I know many of you on the line right now are writing more localized stories about small businesses in your state. I think this report does a nice job taking a snapshot of not only the state of small businesses by geography, but also looking at them by industry and category and being a little more holistic in the approach of comparing those states across regions and across the country. I think this is probably going to work best if I open it up for questions. I did want to touch on a couple of things before we jump in there. One is that in the sort of with the context of the identification of drivers, adopters, and maintainers, with the proof points of the digital safety net, the 3C team really set out to find ways that we could help craft somewhat of a roadmap back towards normalcy. That the road to recovery is going to be driven, just as the road to growth has been for decades, by small businesses. And that any help that we can give our members and small businesses around the country to find that path back, we were eager to do so. So what you're going to find in here is recommendations for small businesses in terms of their use of digital tools and services, for technology companies that frequently provide those tools and services, as well as the policymakers who are increasingly involved in regulation of or access to those tools and services. I think thematically you'll find that those recommendations all adhere to one central premise, which is that lowering the barrier to entry for small businesses to utilize the tools and services they need in an increasingly competitive marketplace is good for consumers, is good for small businesses, and therefore it's good for the country. And we want to help make that happen anywhere and anyhow we can. Okay, why don't I open it up for questions? I'm happy to answer anything on a national level as well as on a state by state. If the specifics for the states might take me a second to source to find the data sets, but I'm more than happy to dig into any of those. I just saw somebody's question pop up about state specifics. If you're on the microsite, you can actually use the heat map, which is, I think, midway down the page, to click on the states, and it'll give you the snapshot and the dashboards of each state.
So I'm going to ask Rob Retzloff. You already did it. Thank you, Rob. The link to the dashboard is in the chat, so you can look there. For questions, first question we have Lily from WABE in Atlanta asked, are these businesses faring better during the pandemic because they are more digitally connected, or because they already were more financially secure than others that can't afford this right now?
There's not a lot of evidence that a higher level of digital empowerment correlates with higher capitalization or a bigger cash reserve. What is obvious and clear throughout all the categories of small businesses across states and industries is that the higher level of digital tool integration resulted in more agility. The ability to make changes, to work from home, to transport a brick and mortar store to an online portal, or in some instances to lower costs through the efficiencies that you can drive through some of these tools and services, and to bridge the gap a little bit. There's not, it's interesting on the issue of sort of survivability. The larger a company is, the more likely they were to sustain. It had almost nothing to do with the digital tool usage, or the correlate was negated, because they could cut more costs in terms of overhead and employees. But for those small businesses that are drivers, or categorized as drivers, that maintain their employment base, that use digital tools to reach new audiences and to maintain revenue, we saw a pretty insignificant drop. I mean, it's easy for me to say 6% is still a drop, and it's rough, but related to adopters and maintainers, or relative to adopters and maintainers, it's significantly less. Chris, we just got a question specific to Georgia that's radio that I'm more than happy to answer and sort of hit that soundbite on, which is that the state of Georgia has a fairly high, relative to the rest of the country, number of drivers within its borders. Those businesses run the gamut in industries from hospitality and arts and recreation to retail and marketing. What we see in states like Georgia is a particular resilience, largely correlated to tool use and a high degree of sustainability. You know, that certainly thousands of small businesses have been lost throughout the state, if not millions, but the truth is that the vast majority of those small businesses that are digital drivers or adopters have a higher rate of sustainability and success, and a higher likelihood of bouncing back.
And then, Jake, do you want to just walk through for Georgia some of the top line stats, the percentage of drivers, and maybe how that compares nationally, and the projected revenue loss for Georgia versus nationally?
Sure. In Georgia, we see a higher percentage of drivers. Nearly 40% of the small businesses in Georgia that responded are what we consider to be drivers, which is 16 points higher than the national average. Somebody check my math on that, but I think that's right. The adopters were actually smaller than the national average, and the maintainers were right on average, which means that you have a pretty significant group of small businesses in the state that have invested in tools, services, online marketplaces, and other technologies that give them resilience and agility in times of crisis. But you also have this group of small businesses that have been able to survive amid the pandemic, despite not having some of the same points of resilience that we see among the driver group, which is long-term good news. It means that as those businesses begin to utilize these tools and services and incorporate them into their business, they will become even more resilient and grow faster, and we can reach a higher degree of sustainability. One of the things about this concept of a digital safety net is that it is very real, very from a tactical standpoint, small businesses can say, I was able to reach a new consumer base because of this advertising tool, or I managed my existing customer base through this CRM. And as a whole, those tools sort of weave together the safety net, but it's not big enough, right? That safety net caught millions of small businesses, but it can get bigger. It's something that American small businesses need to avail themselves of by making an investment of time, more so than money, frankly, because most of the tools we're talking about don't cost that much. They cost tens of dollars a month, not tens of thousands. These are the enterprise quality tools provided to millions of small businesses from platforms and American technology companies that have given that have provided the spine of this road to recovery.
Great. Other folks who are on computer have any questions? We can sort of open the floor.
Sorry, Chris. Let me jump back in there too for the Georgia folks. That two of our case studies in the report are from Georgia. I think one is Atlanta. I can't remember where the other one is. Beaufort, I think. But those are incredibly affecting stories, as well as good guidelines for Georgia-based small businesses and small businesses throughout the Southeast.
Great. Anyone else on their computer would like to ask a question? All right, anyone who's dialed in on their phone, go ahead and ask away.
All right. Well, people think through. Let me just jump back on one of these points that I wanted to make earlier. Is that past 10 years or so, the technology industry, sort of the innovation industry, has been using this phrase, the digital transformation, as a sort of mile marker or a sign of the times that every company is a software company, right? That the tools and services, you've probably all heard the phrase that software is going to eat the world. Well, until this year, it was coming in drips. Large companies were making huge investments in large technology plays or improved software programming. Small businesses were increasingly using G Suite, Salesforce, Intuit's QuickBooks, and other software programs, sort of off-the-shelf cloud computing programs, to create what we call a small stack, right? It's to put all of these tools and services in their own sort of customizable IT program, in hopes of being able to look and operate as if they were a much larger enterprise. Anyway, the idea of the digital transformation was always pretty simple. The realization of that concept was not. However, we were talking about a massive investment of capital, and more importantly, a pretty significant motivational shift for legacy small businesses, for companies that didn't imagine that there was much to be gained by investment of time and resources or money. But the truth is, in 6 months, US small businesses particularly have adopted this mantra of digital transformation, and that is what has enabled these businesses to survive. At a time of unprecedented economic catastrophe, some small businesses have maintained, others have sustained, and of these 7,000 plus that we spoke to, the vast majority are optimistic about the future because of their resilience and their perseverance, but also because their access to resources. With that in mind, we need to, as an organization, as communities, as a country, we need to invest in that continued access and to be reticent of any attempt to reduce that access or increase the cost of that access, or to do anything less than give small businesses our full-throated support as they try to get back on their feet. I think I just saw somebody drop a question on there, Chris.
Yep, we have a question from Michelle Price. She said, from the report, in Tennessee, 34% of small businesses are digital drivers compared to 35% nationally, with a predicted 8.1% in revenue reduction compared to an expected 16% reduction in revenue nationally. Why is the revenue reduction half when the digital drivers is almost the same?
I think that probably has to do more with the types of industries that were affected rather than the categorization of the industries. Not every type of company, whether they're classified as digital drivers or not, can maintain their same level of revenue or not. The crisis didn't affect every industry the same, even, and in fact, sometimes in spite of their investment of resources. The markers of resilience relative to less prepared or less digitally empowered are still clear. A maintainer in that same industry would have lost significantly more year-over-year revenue, but it's not a one-to-one translation. Anybody else?
Jake, this is Cindy Morley from Georgia.
Hey, Cindy.
Hi, how are you? This is a little bit different type question, but I know in the report you made the recommendation was made to policymakers to maybe look at ways to fund this to help small businesses. In that regard, do you have any ideas of who would drive this? How do we get the message out to small business owners to help them drive this to policymakers?
Sure, that's a good question. Thank you, Cindy. So one of the things that we probably already knew this, but it was certainly stark to see it in black and white, is that the number one hurdle to overcome for small businesses to adopt the tools and services that make them digitally empowered and therefore enable them to have a higher level of sustainability and success is education. And I don't mean that they don't know how to use the tools or services or marketplaces. I mean, they don't think they know how to use the tools or services or marketplaces. There's sort of as an attitudinal barrier to entry, and that can largely be overcome by helping small businesses understand that these tools aren't complex or they aren't hard or that they are worth it, right? That they are worth the time and energy to learn how to do it, or that there are other avenues that small businesses can take to get there. I was on a call earlier today, and one of the speakers of this panel I was hosting said, if you can't figure it out, just hire a teenager. They'll help you with this. I said, it's probably not that simple, but I understand exactly what you mean, right? It's the confidence of a digital native that enables you to tackle these projects that otherwise feel too large. That Business Administration, which has had a little bit of a rough run over the past 6 months, but did a remarkable job, frankly, in given the conditions that they were operating in the political atmosphere in which they were trying to get hundreds of millions of dollars into the hands of small businesses. They did a remarkable job. They are often overlooked as a remarkable federal resource in local communities. The SBDC, the Development Centers for Small Business Administration, are great mentoring programs and funding programs for small businesses, and we need to do everything we can to get them the resources they need to bring that content to bear. But I also think a private-public partnership that gives America's largest most innovative companies that are already invested in small businesses, small business success, access to community groups and vice versa is incredibly useful. A Google hub in Atlanta is valuable to the people who know it's there and how to use it, but it would be more valuable online, virtual, that also gave access to Intuit and Facebook technologies and helped people with website design and had the stamp of the state of Georgia and the federal government in terms of a public-private partnerships that is there to benefit small businesses.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That goes for every state in the country, by the way, not just Georgia.
Other questions for Jake? Please go ahead. Okay, I don't see any more in chat. Anyone that's dialed in on the phone, if you'd like to ask a question, now is the perfect time.
In lieu of any additional questions, I'll make one last point that I think is important, if not for coverage, then certainly for context as we go through this. 58% of small businesses we surveyed said that digital tools were more important during the pandemic than they had been previous. And a significant portion of these businesses said they weren't going back, right? The integration of new tools into their business function was their new normal. I bring this up both to tout the importance of small business adoption and maintaining these resources, but also of our collective interest in assuring these small businesses that they'll continue to have access to the tools and services. Some of the world's largest technology platforms, all of which are made right here in the United States, are being investigated by attorneys generals and the Department of Justice at a time when we need them to keep doing what they're doing, right? That this is working. The vertical integration of the digital economy is based on consumer value, end user empowerment, and investment at every stage. And 3C, on behalf of its members, is going to continue to put information like this in front of policymakers, state and federal, until they understand that this is an incredibly important time for American small businesses, and that we are all in this together. We have to invest in each other and support each other throughout this process. Everybody good?
Great. We'll open it up one last time for any questions. Going once, going twice.
If you guys spent some time digging around the report and you have further questions, just ping us. I'm more than happy to dive into any of the specifics around methodology or on the state level, some of the intricacies. I believe the dashboards are pretty intuitive and easy to understand. Broken down by region, they can be pretty interesting. The heat maps should be fairly interesting, fairly easy to navigate. But if they're not, let us know. We're here to help.
Great.
All right.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And I put my email into the chat, so if you have any questions further, feel free to email me, and we will do our best to answer.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks.